What is your name, what are your pronouns, and what are you going to talk about today?
So my name is Nick Minns, my pronouns are he, him, and I'm here today to talk about my diagnosis with ADHD.
Could you please give us an ADHD 101?
So ADHD affects concentration, also can affect the way that you react with the things around you. Easily distracted. I'm very easily distracted by multiple noises going on or things which might be moving about. So yeah, it's concentration, but also you can fidget a lot, want to move around a lot as well. So it's a lot more complex than I probably first thought.
Could you please give us a brief description of what having ADHD means to you personally?
For me, it means a lot of external distractions. I always need to be hearing noise. I'm not a massive fan of things being massively quiet all the time, even when I'm studying. It also means moving about a lot, fidgeting. I was a drummer growing up, so it was, my feet were tapping all the time, and my mum and dad were always saying, "Can you pack that tapping in?" I was only diagnosed this year, so at the age of 37. So it's been a long time coming, but again, there's things back in the past where I've maybe thought, oh God, yeah, that's probably ADHD.
How did having ADHD affect you growing up?
I was always active, always wanting to go out with my friends, and I thought that was maybe me just being sociable, but when I look back and really assess things, it's more probably about me not wanting to be still. Even when I was in my room, there was music going on, I was messing about with things. I never was one for sitting down and reading, sitting down and kind of doing things like that. I found quite difficult to keep my mind in one place. At school, again, it was one of those where I'd want to be doing things all the time. And even leaving school and growing up, it was always trying to fill my time with everything. So football, playing in a band, working. I really didn't like to have any downtime. And I think that attributed a lot to the fact that ADHD was probably playing a part then at an earlier age than what I probably thought it was. There's a real funny video online where it's basically a guy getting up and it's him living just a morning with ADHD, and there's about 40 different voices going on in his head trying to read a book, do this, we should do that, and that's what it's like. It is quite exhausting because you have a million different things that your brain wants to do, but sometimes you can't prioritise. You've got to prioritise the main things and not just go off on a tangent, which I sometimes can.
Have you felt you've been marginalised or stereotyped due to having ADHD?
It would be difficult to say as of yet, because being kind of only a recent diagnosis, no one's come to me and said, "We thought you maybe had ADHD." Even though I have said to some of my old work colleagues, "Oh, by the way, I've been diagnosed with ADHD," and they've gone, "Yeah, we could probably see that from the way that you work, Nick." So it was. I used to do stock taking, so it was loads of counting all the time, and I wasn't particularly good at maths, but because it was a lot of, I could kind of hyper focus on things as well. So they were kind of like my strong points, really. So I don't feel like I've been marginalised or there's been anything negatively seen from me having ADHD. Hyper focus for me is a really, really intense concentration where you can almost become completely lost in something. I talked a little bit about reading books. There's only 2 books which I've read in my life, which I've actually managed to read from start to finish and not got bored halfway through and thought, I can't be bothered with this anymore. But when I tend to read, I tend to imagine myself as the main character and then lose myself in the story. That was, I think, where I kind of lost myself. But that was like hyper focusing on almost every little word, what it kind of meant in an emotional reaction sense. Even trying to imagine the scene around me at the time when I was in the story, and even down to sometimes when a football coach, it can be pretty much everything around me just stops. It feels like everything around me stops and I'm just in that moment, and I'm just concentrating on what's going on in front of me. But I don't really notice a lot of the external things around me.
Has anything negative to do with your ADHD happened at the university, or have you felt quite accepted?
To be honest with you, I felt absolutely welcomed in to a team as well and a community in the university. You probably see from the t-shirt. I'm currently a student partner working within the SPLD community. And to be honest with you, I think a lot of the opportunities which have come through here, you know, with regards to the SPLD community and working a little with EDI, have all come from the fact that I've had and been diagnosed with ADHD, and it's given me an opportunity to maybe broaden my knowledge on things which maybe I'd been a bit ignorant to in the past and not really thought much of with regards to learning differences and, you know, neurodiversity as a whole, really. I didn't really think anything of dyslexia or dyspraxia or dyscalculia in the past, but now that I'm suffering from a neurodiversity myself, it's made me kind of open up to a lot of other things which are going on around me and want to learn more and educate myself as well. But no, my experience within university has been really good.
So could you do some myth busting about stereotypes surrounding ADHD?
I think one of the big ones for me is, I think when you say ADHD, a lot of people tend to think of, just being quite erratic, jumping up and down and moving about and wanting to run about and walk out of lessons. And don't get me wrong, there is some people who have that, but it's interesting the different types of ADHD as well. There's obviously the kind of more attention deficit side, and then there's the hyperactivity side, or there's where you are, where I am, where I'm kind of in the middle, where I've got traits of both, really. But I think the main thing is just it's a lot more complex than people tend to think of it as one thing. So it's either you're jumping about or you just sat there not listening to anything. And also, especially kids at school, they're not naughty children. I think that's a big thing. If kids or students have ADHD, they should be understood more than just labelled as someone who's just not listening or someone who's naughty. So those are probably the big myths that I've kind of come across that I'd like to see busted a little more, really. So
how could the people around you and the university do better?
I think I've probably said before, you know, there's always things people, you know, things can do. I think it is as much a student responsibility as it is a staff responsibility. Sometimes the staff don't necessarily know things are put in place with regards to like, you know, measures which are put in place, or I can't remember what the name of the things are with regards, this is the ADHD thing, so I've kind of gone 2 steps ahead of myself. But when you kind of get special measures put in place where you can have certain things which are there, so you can, you know, leave a room if you want to, or even though I'd never leave a room because I kind of feel like it was impolite more than, you know, the fact that I'd want to walk out. But I think it's more from, if a student's struggling with things and they have ADHD, then they need to kind of speak up and let it almost be known to the staff member, because sometimes, like with anything, it can get lost in translation through the system. It might not get filtered down to the proper people, and then, you know, you're left out at saying you're kind of struggling. So, but also I think staff have a bit more interest in engaging with students as well. If there is that, then how can they help? It should be, you know, if they can change the slides or make things, you know, available earlier, so it kind of gives you a bit of a chance to catch up with things beforehand. If a lecturer's just stood there and there's a whiteboard, that's it, I'm gone. I can't, if he's kind of quite articulate and he engages the lesson and he's quite, you know, he uses plenty of gestures, I'm a lot more engaged with it. But just following something on a whiteboard, I can't really do it. I need something going on to kind of keep me interested, really. So
how do you feel the media represents someone with ADHD?
It's an interesting one with regards to ADHD, because obviously only really like beginning of this year that I started kind of really looking at kind of typical stories and how, you know, how the media sees it. I think sometimes a lot of the media, they have a set how they think that ADHD should look, and I don't particularly think that. I think it's very similar to like mental health. They have a bit of a label, there is a little bit of a stigma, and I think that's through past stories and past judgments of how individuals act. You know, ADHD means you're a naughty kid, autism means you're a naughty kid. It's not, it just means that you learn differently, and everyone's got a different way of learning, and just because you have these things, it doesn't mean that you're any less of a person or you're any less of a learner. You just have a different way of learning, really. But I think the media has a lot more work to do with majority of things to make these things more accessible in a positive way.
Is there anything else that you would like to say, or anything you'd like anyone to know about ADHD?
It's a superpower. That's how I see it. How people can have all these different thoughts and different things going on in their head on a daily basis and still manage to operate amazes me. I mean, mine's not really bad, but there's some people I've met along the way who I thought, God, they're just amazing. Like how, they're managing to get on. I mean, my cousin's son, he has autism, ADHD, more on the hyperactive side, and he has quite bad deficit disorder as well. He also has dyscalculia and a small amount of dyslexia as well. But he carries on, and he's a rugby player, and he's doing well at school. Those kids and those people, to me, are just, they're amazing and inspiring. And just because you have this, like a lot of learning differences, use it to your advantage, because there's loads you can still do. It doesn't mean that you're any less of a person. And I think superpower, definitely.